Everyone. Can everyone hear me okay in the room, in Zoom? All right. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here on such a beautiful day. Let's begin by acknowledging that we gather today on the ancestral homelands of the Coast Salish peoples who have lived in the Salish Sea Basin throughout the San Juan Islands and the North Cascades watershed from time immemorial. Please join me in expressing our deepest respect and gratitude for our Indigenous neighbors, the Lummi Nation and Nooksack tribe, for their enduring care and protection of our shared lands and waterways. The land acknowledgement is particularly important today, given the focus of our panel discussion, which is all about learning and working together across cultures. My name is Kate Darby. I'm a professor of environmental studies. This quarter, I'm facilitating the speaker series, and we're doing a series of panels around cross-disciplinary and cross-cultural conversations. So I was really excited to bring these folks together for our first panel. I know and work with Travis and Jean, and I've been hearing about their wonderful work with White Swan Environmental for years. And I think what we're going to hear today really exemplifies this theme of working together across discipline, across cultures, and figuring out how to navigate that. So I am going to hand it over to them and let them kind of take the lead for the rest of our time together. But I did just want to give a little plug for next week's panel, which is going to focus on the question of what is the future of environmental governance, which is a question I think is at the forefront of many of our minds. So thank you all for being here, and I will hand the torch.
The torch. You can all help us remember that we have to have the microphone and that we're to speak into it the right way. So we're going to open with Kwaselmat Sadie, my friend, has offered to do an opening song for us. Most of the things that we do together, we start with words from the heart and or a song. So we're going to do that today. And I'd encourage you to stand up as you're able, or show respect in a way that affirms your sense of culture and her culture, and we'll begin that way.
Neith na stílam ta swan song. Oh, yeah. Quelnita solalita. Oh, hey, yeah, hey, yeah. Quelnita sololita. Oh, hey, yeah, hi, yeah. Hi, oh, hey, yeah. Oh, yeah. Clonita, solalita. Oh, hey, yeah. Hey, yeah. Clonita, sololita. Oh, hey, yeah. Hi, yeah. Hi, oh, hey, dos, quaios, y tested mole. 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 Oh, ho. Dos, quaios, y tested mole. 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 Oh, ho. So that's the swan song, and it shares the story of the swans, and swans pair together for life. And our ancestor, um, he was a Bulch, had a relationship with the swans, and he felt that they would come and say, until we see each other again. They would visit every year and then go over the hill and say, until we see each other again. So they would come back the next year. And we grew up in the Swan family. And that is kind of the origin of why we're called White Swan Environmental. Heishka. I don't know how much introductions I should do because it's written down.
You want to introduce yourself?
Yeah,
Then you can do the panel.
sure. Now, siam nostalgisiam kusamat sanasnat chokwachlamisan, nuchisan macalia quanasanatachel, nasklit quanasqual quinasqual, outsan kachit sakwachlamichasan, e utatasan quanastanau. My traditional name is Kusama. My English name is Shirley Williams. My maternal and paternal bloodline have lived within the federally reserved lands of Lummi Nation for 7 generations. I did want to do an introduction today because I want to express that it's an honor to be here. My grandmother was Mary Wallace Seaholm, and Seaholm was named after my grandma's family. Edmund Fitzhugh registered Seaholm after my grandma. So when we think about Tainuk, territory of the Lummi people, my grandma was actually Clallam Samish. And when we talk further, I'll share more about what we're trying to restore and who we are and where we come from. But I wanted to honor my grandma Seaholm today. Thank you.
People are welcome to sit down also, or stand up or do yoga or whatever it is that will help you stay engaged. When Gene just introduce himself, and then I can, and I'll kind of say, just share who you are.
Was who I am and where I came from.
We are from and then how we've been working together over the years with Swan Environmental and the same with you, and then we'll talk about our relationship.
Okay. Does that work? Ready?
Sure.
Dive
You
right
might
in.
have to use.
Whatever's on your heart, Gene.
Thank you. Hello, can you hear me okay? Thank you. My name's Gene Myers. I'm a faculty member. It's my 31st year in the College of Environment, but I was also a student here. Before this building was here, it was just grass. Before that, there's a swamp around here, I understand. So I teach in the environmental education, the education and eco-social justice concentration in the Department of Environmental Studies. And part of that is our spring block program, which is an odd name, but it's because 4 courses, 17 credits are all one block. And we've got about, well, 5, 6, who else from this year's block? Anybody else here? About 6 folks are here. There's 22. It's all you take. You can have a part-time job, but we spend a lot of time in the field, and we develop partnerships with groups that have youth and community groups to practice education and environment and eco-social justice. So I'll say more about where that's gone recently, but I'm also to talk about who I am and where I come from. I grew up in Seattle, and on my mom's side of the family, my great-grandfather was 2 years old when his father came west on the Oregon Trail in 1853. And I have felt proud of that, but on further reflection, I've thought, I wonder what role they had in what unraveled around those periods of time. That was around the time of the Whitman massacre, some other events in southeast Washington where they settled. My great-grandfather was killed by a tree he was felling in the Blue Mountains, and I've always felt like, well, maybe my environmentalism is sort of trying to make things right around that. But before all that, those folks were from Illinois. My father's side was kind of Central European. I'm ethnically a European mutt, with a language arts teacher for a mother who taught languages. And so I've always had really good English. And to my ear, I don't have an accent. Isn't that interesting? Washingtonians don't have an accent. Huh. I'm sort of highlighting some of the ways we can be self-centric in our perceptions, right? As far as the European side of that, I was really struck one time when I looked up on Wikipedia, wars in Europe. And I found a virtually endless list. Any period of time that there's historical records, there are wars and conflicts in the area that my people come from. And we know what conflict and violence do in terms of traumatizing people. So it made me think, I'm from a traumatized people. What traumatized people do is often reenact violence. So, and that was an interesting perspective. And they work to heal. And I think hopefully that's part of what I've been working on. And particularly in the last 10 years or so, working with Shirley and Troy and Sadie and others with White Swan Environmental. We began pretty modestly with some student curriculum projects, like the clam gardens curriculum. And then 4 or 5 years ago, we started doing our island trip together with White Swan and their interns and their Wasanich relatives from the Saanich Peninsula north of Victoria on Vancouver Island, because where we were, Susia Island or Theokoman is shared lands, islands. And where we've been going after the first couple of years is Steaman, John's Island, which is very close. It's right next to Harrow Strait, practically. It's just inside of Stewart. So right across, we can see right across to relatives of our partners there. So I'll maybe say more along the way, but we've been learning and working together and benefiting by the great graciousness and generosity of our partners and hosts on the island. I think that'll do it.
Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. I'm Travis Tennyson. My parents are Chuck and Karen Tennyson. They're educators both grew up in Wisconsin. My grandparents are Tom Arbogast and Jane Arbogast from Madison, Wisconsin, and Peter and Eunice Tennyson who are dairy farmers in southeastern Wisconsin, Spring Prairie area. I've know some pieces of my lineage. Some of my ancestors were Protestants who were chased out of what is now France by the Catholic king in the 1500s. They ended up in Amsterdam and then in New Amsterdam, which we call New York City right now. And they were some of the first black slaveholders in that new settlement. So, pieces of our past are, as Jean was saying, are really complicated. And there's a lot of unpacking we have to do about who we are and where we come from. I've lived in the Salish Sea region for about 11 years, and the great passion for ecological restoration and environmental studies, environmental history that I came with, and was so fortunate to meet Shirley at spring break of 2017 when she was working at the Lummi Youth Academy. And we ended up, she and Troy and Sadie were part of our Community Engagement Fellows program that next year. And we started hosting film series, forums on truth and reconciliation. And Sadie became my co-facilitator of Community Engagement Fellows when you were in high school, Running Start. And we found all these ways to weave our work together and create spaces for feeling like all of our, our cultures are both represented, and that we're able to practice healing and learning together in ways that feel affirming and that help people move their work forward. And I've got a handful of things that I feel like I've learned along the way, which maybe I'll share in a little bit, but I want to give them space to say more about what they want, unless you want me to do that now. Okay, here we go. Okay, I'm a storyteller. I'm going to tell real quick stories though. Okay, good. Don't want you to get bored. So I was doing graduate research in Alaska. I grew up on Kodiak Island. It was one of the places my parents taught in small, mostly indigenous villages. And I was in a village, Port Lions, interviewing my friend's uncle one morning, and the interview was not going well. I was asking him questions about wildlife management, wildlife conflict, because that's what I was studying, and he was giving me these boring answers, just like one-word answers. And we were just like, oh, this is bad. How do we get out of this? And I started as a good interview thing, start telling stories of your own experience. I said, oh, when I was with JR in middle school, snaring rabbits, this and that. And he said, hold on, you know JR? And I said, yeah. And I said, yeah, I'm friends with JR. He's your nephew. Like, I grew up with him. I'm friends with him. And he said, oh, I thought you were just some guy. Right. So that's deep though, right? Because I had failed to share who I was and where I came from. And so I was just some guy, some university guy that showed up and was taking his time and not being very helpful. And he was bored and not interested. That's why he was giving me terrible answers and boring. We were boring each other. But then we dove in. Once I explained myself and I said, I know I've been hearing about you my whole life as somebody that knows all about the animals in this bay. I know you lived in a Fognak village before the tsunami. So you knew that community and its relationship with the elk herd, yada, yada. And so all of a sudden he was telling me everything, and it was so interesting. And we had to have a couple cups of tea before we were done. So share who you are and where you come from. Another little story is, remember the first year that Shirley, that you were in Community Engagement Fellows, and sometime in one of our meetings, you asked along the lines of like, when are you taking all of this back to Western? Like all this conversation that we're having. And in what I heard in that was an experience and an expectation of extraction, right? That we were coming together for some other unclear, but self-centered reason to extract something for the people that were engaging there. And I had to bumble my way and say, this is it. Like what we're doing here is we're making value together. We're not trying to extract anything from anybody. And let's all help each other do that. So I think having clear and honest motives is really important as well. And then one other piece, and we can talk about this or look at slides later maybe, but creating spaces together has been such a joy and such a thing that we've gotten better at, not saying, hey, can you come be a part of my program? Or, hey, can you come be part of my program? But like sitting together and talking and texting and figuring out what can we do that overlaps with your vision and my vision and what kind of world we're trying to create together. And to create those spaces and then create tools that help us practice in those spaces. And the talk tiles that we've created, and there are the big versions of them out on the lawn that you can look at if you didn't see them on the way in, that are a discussion tool, a conversation tool, but that we use with the Lummi words and the English words. So we're all doing language learning and thinking in a cross-cultural way. That really helps us. I feel like it helps us do our work. And it gives us a creative space to figure out what to do next. And there's more joy, less trauma, less confusion, even though this kind of work is hard and it's never quite clear what you should do next because the world keeps changing. So I could tell more stories, but I'm not going to right now. You'll have to draw them out of me if you want more.
I'm just going to go through the questions that we chose, and it's just, who are you? Where do you come from? How are you learning and working together across cultures? So who am I? I kind of explained a little bit about my lineage. I am related to the late hereditary chief Bill James of Lummi Nation. We are related through Chief Seattle. I'm 7 generations from Chief Seattle. I could go down that lineage. I probably should be Duwamish, but Duwamish was never recognized. We are also related through Chief Salik and our uncle Chowitsut, who brought the first settlers, Roeder and Peabody, from Olympia by canoe to Whatcom Creek, to their longhouse at Whatcom Creek. And there's an 1857 topography of that, and that is who our late chief is named after, Salik. And then I'm also related through the House of Statithlam. So that's where my grandma Mary Wallace Seaholm comes from, Weach, 6th brother of the House of Statithlam. My 4th brother, if you ever go to Jamestown, Clallam, go to the cultural exhibit, the library. That's all my family there. You'll see Lord Jim Balch was very prominent. He had, all of our people were removed from these ancestral homelands, and he had to come up with 500 gold coins to be able to retain land, and didn't understand taxes and lost that land, and then had to figure it out again. My 7th brother was also a treaty signer. It comes down from Lac Canaan, but my grandfather, Thomas Jefferson, from that lineage, was also a treaty signer. So from Chowitsut, signatory number 24 for North-Saanich Douglas Treaty to fish as formally. And then in 1855, he's signing for Lummi and Nooksack to fish in our usual and accustomed fishing areas. How do you fish as formally in a usual and accustomed fishing areas when you're separated by an international border and onto reservations? So when you look at, maybe you've seen the PBS, The Last Reef Netter. My grandma Aurelia talked about how we would travel in a figure 8. That's Jamestown, Clallam. So from that documentary, you're going to see a figure 8, and that's my ancestral homelands. So what White Swan has been doing is putting those food systems back into place. We cannot access our ancestral village sites, camps, reef net locations, and restore 13 Moon food sovereignty unless we bridge the native, non-native divide. And I'm very grateful to the partners that I have here because they've had the courage to stand with White Swan. I hear that sometimes if people talk about equity, which we're not even allowed to do that in certain spaces, that people will walk away. And that's a really unfortunate space to be in. I feel like as an Indigenous person here in my ancestral homelands, it's hard to be seen. When you have presidents, you have very prominent people of history, they're recognized. You're taught about their history, but you're not taught about our history as the first people of this land. So I'm grateful to Senator McCoy, who helped advocate at the state level for the Senate Bill 5433, where common schools are mandated to teach tribal history, culture, governance, and language, and they have an RCW. And that gives us an opportunity, yet we still have to appease the dominant system that has placed us in these boxes of education. And it's when I look at White Swan and who I am and where I come from, what I imagine is being able to replace our longhouses back in our ancestral homelands. When I think of how that would help the environment, look at Paul Hawkins' drawdown. Indigenous land management ranks, number 39, and could reduce CO2 by 6.19 gigatons. And that's global scientists all over the world. So imagine if we had our longhouses back in our ancestral homelands, the 0.65 out of 8.7 million people in the Salish Sea. And imagine if we were able to be present and practice our treaty rights. Now, as we, the people, if we understood the supreme law of the land, then those treaty rights could help protect the environment. And you have a minute amount of Indigenous people who have lived here since time immemorial. Julia Stein says 6,000 years, 11,000 years, 23,000 years she knows we've been here. So imagine if we were able to restore that ancestral land management, and that's what we do with Jean, because we wouldn't have the opportunity. Unfortunately, nobody would want to listen to us as Indigenous people if we don't have allied support that are non-Indigenous to help us practice our treaty rights. Or as Travis witnessed, when we go in front of the National Park Service in our ancestral village site, where we had a 600, 800-foot longhouse. And when the British came in, they tore down our longhouse. They burned down our burial site in that little island in the center of Garrison Bay. And they built their military barracks. We had clam middens, football field long, football field wide, and 10 feet deep. And all of that was reorganized. And so what does the parks know about this history? They don't know anything, and Travis has been witnessing for 10 years. So all we're doing is trying to advocate, and what I would like to see, instead of sitting here thinking of culture, cross-culture, this doesn't feel like culture to me, because we're not practicing as we would naturally. What we're doing is we're appeasing the dominant system to try to get those longhouses back so that we can practice our way of life and that we can serve as a layer of environmental protection with our inherent rights and with our acquired rights, our treaty rights, the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of the Indigenous People, United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and let's give rights back to nature. And let's protect this Salish Sea, because we have a quality of life like we don't have it anywhere in the world. And with White Swan's mission and vision that Sadie will share, we have the opportunity to move beyond epistemicide, the genocide of traditional knowledge systems, and transform social science and public health. That's what I truly believe across the United States and Canada and around the world. And that's a little bit about who my family is, and all those families have been placed on Lummi Reservation for 7 generations. But I'm glad that I hear the protocol. You hear our song. You hear us introducing ourselves and who we are and where we come from. And in our school, you'll find we have more in common from the trauma that we can recognize within ourselves and do our own personal healing, and then understand how not to perpetuate that trauma on other people today.
Squile, Quasamat Sinasnat, Chat Uchlamisin, at Sanich Sahanap Husmeans, Anaman, Kusamat, Sinatan, Suitsin, Ohilok, Quinus Asla, Atiakaias, Nuchchisin, Maqualia, Quinus Inatachel, Nestli, Quinus Qual, Aquaquino Squall, Outsin, Chit Sa Uchlamichasin, Utatasin, Quinus Twinalps. Haishka atia schino I huyen atia squile. Good day, my friends and relatives. My traditional name is Quasilmut. My English name is Sadie Olson. I am from the Lummi Nation. My father is Sahanap Husmean, and we come from Huchatlip, Tsartlip on Vancouver Island. And my mother's Kusamat, and we come from Lummi and all of the places she mentioned, Jamestown, Sklallam, Elwha, Duwamish territories, Lummi, and then on my dad's side, I also come from Semiahmoo.
Our traditional name comes from Songhees, Esquimalt, Souk area, most likely Clallam.
Songhees, Esquimalt, and Souk, most likely Clallam. So there's Clallam, and then there's Sklallam, and there's Jamestown, Sklallam. So there's different places that we come from. And I'm just happy to see all of you here today. I just wanted to say a few words. I don't know the Lummi language, and I'm still learning how to speak it. I have been grateful to listen in today, and I'm grateful for all of you for your good listening. And this experience working between cultures, as trying to bring in our Indigenous heritage and our way of life through our nonprofit, and our collaborations with Western. since I was in high school, and then since I was in college, I'm trying to learn the system so that we can protect our environment and we can protect our people without being harmed by being on the front lines. Like we're being on the front lines through education and legislation, and that was always our goal. And we used to sit in the car, my mom and my dad and I, and we would talk about all of the atrocities that were happening in the world and how like we need to do something about it. And I was in aiming high. I did a lot of diverse thinking, and then a lot of I pushed me into honors where I ended up having issues through academics, not necessarily with academics, but because I was challenging the curriculum that genocide didn't only happen on the other side of the world, and that it happens right here, and that our land and our people and our future generations are the ones who are going to suffer from it, and they thought I was a disturbance. So a lot of things have happened, and it's really great to have these collaborations with Western and like uplift our voices and our mission and our vision. So our mission is to support community healing for the natural, cultural, historical, and ecological restoration to the Salish Sea for seventh generation sustainability as a measure of ecological health protection for all. And we are the vision keepers for an Indigenous-led 13 Moons, Mountain to Sea, Reef to Reef K through PhD program called the Coast Salish Tribal Heritage Field Institute. So we had these conversations that led to us meeting with land managers, with parks people, with other PhDs who helped us get to where we are and helped us make our mission and our vision and carry forward some of these dreams so that we can share it in a concise way so that we can get the support that we need. And our mission has led us to co-founding a school called Whatcom Intergenerational High School. And we are trying to develop we are developing a 13 Moons curriculum, starting with who I am and where I come from. So that's all been really amazing. I'm so grateful that we've had so many cohorts. I'm saying cohorts from both collaborations with Travis because when I was in my college, or when I was in high school, I was going into Running Start, and we were meeting a lot with our community through the community engagement fellows, and we were trying to talk about some of these things. And we wanted to make a cohort called Nukw'klami Tenguch, the territory of the Lummi people. And it shares the balance of Indigenous and Western ways of knowing so that we could invite people to learn about who we are and where we come from without being like as that's the right word, exploitive, so that people aren't taking and appropriating our knowledge, because that's been a conversation that we've had with other people, Indigenous peoples working with PhDs, is they will go through and say, oh, this information is being shared, and then it gets taken and used for other reasons. And then our collaboration with Jean has been a long-standing relationship that we've developed and friendship. We've been over to his house for dinner and met with tons of cohort members and shared many meals on the islands. So working with our relatives throughout our homelands and actually being able to connect with our homelands also has been really nice and healing, because I feel honored to be able to share a song with you guys. And that's our protocol, is to open the space with a song and to listen to our elders. And there's so many aspects of our protocol that need to be practiced. Like that's how our history is made as Indigenous peoples. It's not written down. It's not like shared consistently, it's practiced, and you have to practice it over and over and over again. You have to hear these stories so that they're like ingrained in your DNA. And like the more time that we get to spend together, it's just such an honor to try to revive like a spark of what, could have been lost. And I think that we try our best to continue these collaborations by building more curriculum with Western students. I've seen the culture nature assignments, and I've always been like, okay, do I have to make one, or am I just participating? And then trying to figure out like, okay, how are the students participating? And then it's so great because this year the students and our team leads they're like all seniors at Whatcom Intergenerational High School, and they've been learning more of our culture. We've been inviting the next gen cohort into our school, learning bureaucracy and learning how to like make sure that every like thing is written down and that it has a purpose and an objective and an outcome, and that students are clear about those measurables, those things that like we're trying to make our youth like prepared for to be the leaders of in the future, because we were always taught like our youth are the future. But we're really just trying to be able to listen to like all of the natural world around us, because that's what we're taught in our culture, to be the voice for those who can't speak for themselves, like the plant relatives, the relatives of the deep, the trees, the all of the smaller insects that we can't see, the birds. Like we are saltwater salmon people, and oftentimes we're silenced. And I was attempted to be silenced and in my school while advocating for saltwater salmon peoples, and to see our youth, our Lummi youth who would not generally be connected to culture, be these like proud Native youth who are not ashamed of their story or their voices or learning, being learners. It's such a privilege to see and to be a part of, and to know that they won't fall without us, We can hold them up. And all of the relationships that we have made will be there. And that's just, I feel like, a really big outcome of our collaborations is just the amount of like connectivity between people and the land that we've been able to make, and that there's hope that like it won't get lost in the sauce.
Mention what Jean said about the treaty rights and your practice of chemist.
Yeah, so there's a document that Jean wrote, and it was about our camas bake on Huseama, and that is John's Island. And so we went out there, and there's a organization called Camp Nor'wester, and they have a camp on John's Island, and they host it for wealthy kids, and they charge them like $10,000 per youth to go to the island, and they do like labor, and they stay in teepees, and it was very interesting coming onto the territory. They have a longhouse that's not our traditional longhouse, but it was a gift by Kwakwaka'wakw relatives. But our earth ovens were studied there. And my dad, Sahanap Hasmin, found a document that stated that, well, okay, so we also have a planetarium, and we're making this planetarium lesson about camas, right? And the camas is so complex, and the only way I've learned about it is through oral teachings, like other natives who have taught me about camas, and they're scientists, so they're like, okay, there's XYZ information about camas, and I'm like, interested in science. So I'm like telling our trainer, hey, I want to put this in the lesson. And I want to code this into the lesson. And he says, this is an introductory lesson. How do you even know any of that is true? And that triggered my dad because are you calling us liars? Like, this is our territory and these are our resources. This is how our people ate. Like, they're our stories. And then he went and he's on his iPad and he finds the document. And so Gene and White Swan, or well, Western Washington.
Was in too. Grandpa's in that document.
And White Swan went out there. Yeah. And my grandfather, Herman Olson, is documented to state that his auntie was on Johns Island and they did camas bakes there. And so there's all of these like depressions in the land. And so we went out to the island and decided to do a camas bake. And these kids were so like excited. They go out with their shovels and we're like, we're going to do this. And then like everybody's nervous because bureaucracy, like, is this allowed? Is this okay? Are we going to get in trouble? And the youth just took their shovels and dug out some holes and practiced our earth ovens. So that's how we practice. And so the quote in the article is saying that, so Article 5 of the 1855 Treaty of Point Elliott states that we have access to our usual and accustomed territories, including rights to erect houses, to cure salmon, and to store food. So the following quote that we have in there is something that Quasselmet said about how we can only go onto our usual and accustomed territories if title holders or landowners allow or invite us to do those things. So our inherent rights are very limited to like who says yes or no and if it's allowable. And camas was 50% of our diet at some point. Same for salmon. Our Shkwala is very important to us, and it's probably the other 50% of our diet majority. We're salmon people, and we barbecued salmon. My dad took us out fishing all the time, and we grew up on the waters. He taught me about the grasses. He taught me how to weave. He taught me about weaving blankets because we were learning from late Siam Salik. And he taught us about like dyeing with natural plants. And so we learned about all of these like medicinals and all of these like medicines just from being out there at a young age. And then we needed to protect our territory, and Spirit asked the reef net to be placed back out into the land. And the people who were able to do that was the fishermen who go in the Nooksack River and Bellingham Bay, the Lemmy fishermen, and that helped prevent the coal terminal from being placed at Cherry Point at Chiakun. So that was a very pivotal point for Lummi, as a pivotal point for Bellingham. It was a pivotal point for White Swan Environmental because our people come from the Shkwala. That Shkwala saved us and it saved our land and it helped the salmon go for future generations. And it only exists in this territory. And the youth are working on building their own. The youth in Sartlip and Sayao are building their own. And we're coming together again as kinships, and we're remembering to feed each other, to take care of each other. And that's vital. The message in that is not something you'd hear in the Western world. And so I hope those points flow seamlessly for you guys, because these teachings aren't from our brains. They're not from our spirits. They're from the past. They're from the technologies created from so long ago that we need to continue, not only for ourselves, but for our children and our grandchildren. And I'm talking about all of our children and grandchildren. Like, we're very fortunate to have such a beautiful place, and I hope the words of our ancestors, late CL and late Salik, and our chiefs and people who are CMs transfer, and they don't get lost. Anything else? Anything to say? I can close with the song, please.
Sounds good. So we've been co-facilitating this next gen cohort at Watkman Intergenerational High School, and we have to deal with the tyranny of the clock in that school also. So here I'm looking at what does the clock tell us, that it's 5:16 and that we're supposed to officially conclude at 5:20? Am I right? Everybody wants to go out in the sunshine, but I think we're hopefully we're all willing to kind of hang out and mingle and chat, and there's so much more that we could talk about together. And yeah, maybe if you want to do a closing song for us, anyone want to have a final word or a suggestion or something you heard before we do that?
About teaching on the city bank.
He's going to share a song from the Palmerston song. And it's great for it. Yeah, sure.
I'll say a final word, which is, every time I'm hanging out with Shirley and Sadie, I learn so much, and I also watch them having to be so brave navigating these spaces that are not, you said before, like, this doesn't feel cultural, right? So this is, if you look at this room, we've got the chairs locked in to face this way. This is not how a longhouse would be set up, right? We would have done things differently. We got little glimmers of what a cultural space that was the Coast Salish cultural space would be. But I just want to share how I admire that bravery, and also just to encourage other people to lean into your own ability to be uncomfortable, your own ability to be brave, your own ability to learn and experiment and apologize in case you mess up, and to stick with it, because there's so much joy and delight in learning if you can do that, and if you can listen and hang out. And the future of this whole region depends on us remembering how to live well in this space. And people like Sadie and Shirley and Troy are vital to that journey. And so I honor that, and I encourage you to find your own way in that. And we were happy to talk about that together. And we can mingle out out in the sunshine. We have these giant talk tiles that we set up, that we've painted together in different places around the Salish Sea. And there's a little story of what that public art project means to us as one more manifestation of our work together. So we can hang out and there as well.
So one little piece of the language I've learned is how to say thank you. And I may not say it quite right, but trying helps is good. So you hold your hands up, and it's Haishka. Haishka. So you may see this at gatherings where some of Western's Indigenous partners are, whatever. You can do it, and it will say something that you are expressing your gratitude in the local language. It probably has some derivation from the land.
It's a joke with it too.
Oh.
What's the joke? We won't say it right now because we're going to say what closing song.
So this song comes from the Swan song also, the Swan family also, and it's the Quilsalmichton song. It has a mask dance that goes with it. Sweet nostalgia, quil flamicton, out malak, quil flamicton, sweet nostalgia, quil flamicton, out malak, quil flamicton, oh, Mustang, nostalgia. Oh, Mustang, nostalgia. Oh, hey, oh, hey, oh, ho, hey. Oh, hey, oh, hey, oh, ho, hey. Oh, hey, oh, hey, oh, ho, hey. Oh, Mustang, nostalgia. Oh, Mustang, nostalgia. Oh, hey, oh, hey, oh, ho, hey. Oh, hey, oh, hey, oh, ho, hey. Oh, hey, oh, hey, oh, ho, hey. And it says, remember the Kolfal Michtin. Do not forget, they are our relatives. And it's saying, do not forget, we are all related. Or, oh, Mukstang, we are all related. Oh, Mukstang Nishchelicha, we are all related. Haishka, thank you for listening.
Thank you.